All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Global Bernafon webinar series. So today we're actually diving into the topic of tinnitus, how to manage it, how we can support you in delivering more value to your clients, and basically just give a more confidence when dealing with these kinds of clients. And I'll be honest, when I first encountered clients with tinnitus, I actually felt quite anxious because some clients are relatively unbothered, while others are understandably distressed, full of questions and seeking constant reassurance. And for us hearing care professionals, well, it can be quite overwhelming. There are many approaches to tinnitus, but let's clarify one important point. Unless you're specifically trained, you're not expected to provide this full tinnitus assessment or treatment because medical causes like impacted cerumen or Meniere's disease or even vascular issues should be referred to an ENT doctor. Clients with significant emotional distress should be directed to a mental health professional who has the proper training. If you are qualified and equipped to perform tinnitus assessments, such as the pitch or the loudness matching or doing a minimum masking level, then that's fantastic because these tools can definitely validate your client's experience and guide the treatment options like sound therapy or hearing aids. But for the rest of us, whether you're a manager, a technician, a hearing aid dispenser, or an audiologist, our role is just as important because as hearing care professionals, one of the most impactful things we can do is actually to fit hearing aids. And most importantly, we also play a big role in offering accurate information, reassurance, and also hope. So instead of saying there's no cure, we really want to change the conversation and make it more positive because tinnitus has many causes and therefore many potential solutions. So, this is what we'll be focusing on for the next 75 minutes or so. And I'm delighted to introduce our guest speaker for today's session, Danny Knight. So Danny is the partnerships manager at Tinnitus UK. And Tinnitus UK used to be the British Tinnitus Association, if I'm correct. And that's a leading nonprofit organization which is dedicated to supporting people with tinnitus. So we're thrilled to have you with us today to share your insights and also experiences. And of course, together with Christina and myself, we'll be guiding you through the session today. So if you feel like you want to share something in the chat, please feel free to do so. Danny, would you like to share anything? No pressure, but if you want to say something.
Yeah, just a couple of words. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the time that you're all giving up to learn a bit more about tinnitus. Christina and Marielle shared some of your thoughts, some of your questions beforehand, and I think what's really interesting is we're seeing a huge range of topics in there. Everything from kind of technical questions about Bernafon devices, all the way through to how to provide kind of excellent care for someone who's there in front of you there and then. But everyone really wants to know more. That's what's so exciting. So I think we're going to have a great session today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Danny. So to kick things off, I wanted to share this global snapshot with you guys. So this map highlights what professionals in different countries say would help them feel more confident when supporting tinnitus clients. So I did include the names. I did not include them for privacy reasons, but yeah, email me if you want to include your name, but you know who you are. So from Cyprus to Mexico, from Latvia to Hong Kong, the message is really clear. There is a global need for more practical tools, updated knowledge, and shared experiences. Whether it's understanding evidence-based strategies or managing expectations, we want to learn from each other, and we're all striving for the same goal, which is for better care for those living with tinnitus. And while we cannot really cover all of the things in today's webinar, I hope it could be a great starting point to build your confidence in tinnitus and help your clients get relief from their tinnitus. And as we go through today's session, hopefully we would also be able to address many of the questions that you've asked. So we'll start by revisiting the fundamentals of tinnitus, what it is, the most common causes, how it develops, and general recommendations for managing it. And that will be discussed by Danny. And from there, we'll dive into the Bernafon solution, including how to fit a tinnitus client using the Oasis Next fitting software from Christina and me. And finally, to wrap things up, we'll open the floor for a Q&A session. And we've also prepared a fun, well, at least for me, I'm not sure for you guys, but there will be a true or false segment where you can test your knowledge. So stay tuned and see how many questions you can get right. So without further ado, let's move on to the first topic, focusing on the basics of tinnitus. Over to you, Danny.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Marielle. Really, really appreciate the introduction there. I want to start off just by referring to some of the feedback actually that was on that world map you just shared. There was a colleague from Mexico who said that it would help them best to provide a solid explanation of tinnitus, and that is absolutely what we're going to do here. Something that you'll be able to share with a patient or a client in front of you in about 30 seconds, something like that. There was also, I noticed a quote from Latvia, a Latvian colleague here. We were actually featured on Latvian television recently, so have a search for that. It was a really fun crossover to do, but just thought I'd mention it. So tinnitus, the basics. So where are we? So I thought I'd start with the fact that actually tinnitus, I mean, what is it? That's the fundamental question. So tinnitus is, it affects so many people all across the world. And it can be experienced as anything. So it's a noise in your head or ears that doesn't have an external source. It could be a whistling, it could be a banging, it could be a buzzing. Some people experience music, which can be great if the music is good, or terrible if you don't like the music. It can be loud for some people, it can be quiet for others. And when it comes to tinnitus and hearing loss and deafness, 75% of people with tinnitus have some kind of detectable hearing loss, but 25% don't. The other thing is you can have tinnitus if you are profoundly deaf. I met someone here in the UK who said the only sound that she has ever heard is her tinnitus. She can't describe it as a ringing or a buzzing or a whistling because she doesn't have any kind of context around that. She can't describe it like that. So she describes it as like when you drink a fizzy drink and the bubbles kind of rush up the back of your nose and you get that sort of tingling, fizzing sensation. That's how she describes her tinnitus, and it's the only sound that she has ever heard. So it can affect all sorts of people in all sorts of ways. The way that it works is essentially for most people, there is some kind of damage or trauma to the hearing system. And the brain detects that trauma, realizes that there is a gap in the hearing, and fills that gap with a sound. Now, this is a useful thing because we think that it maintains the connections between the audio center in the brain and your ear. So that helps cognitive function. but a different part of your brain doesn't recognize where that noise is from and interprets it as a threat. And that is what then leads to this threat response, a natural threat response from the body. So if you're walking down the street and someone comes up to you with a knife, you will go into fight or flight mode. You will feel tense. Your blood will start pumping. You will suddenly feel very awake and very alert. You'll be hyper focused on everything around you. And that's what the stress of tinnitus is caused by. It's your body's natural response. So the best way to deal with that is, first of all, to understand that it is completely harmless. It is not a problem at all. Tinnitus itself is not going to hurt you. It is not going to cause any further hearing loss. The sound is generated by the brain, so it's not causing any more damage to the ear. There are certain situations where we would recommend getting checked out by a doctor or by an ENT, however it works in the healthcare system in your country, like Marielle mentioned earlier on. But fundamentally, it's not the tinnitus itself that is going to do any damage. It is completely harmless. It can be a symptom of other things, but it's not going to hurt you. The important thing to notice, though, is that tinnitus can impact your physical and your mental health, and that's absolutely key, because quite often, we are not mental health professionals and hearing professionals, and so people can fall through the gaps. But there are some really easy things, some simple things you can do to help manage someone's expectations, which I think was another comment that was mentioned earlier on, and to help them cope and learn to live with their tinnitus, especially early on. So I wanted to share some of the latest numbers. So these are from the UK, but we find that they are broadly applicable. They've been replicated across Europe and the US as well. Those are the numbers that I have to hand. So 1 in 7 adults have got tinnitus. In Latvia, I think that's about 300,000 people from the interview the other day. 1 in 30 children have got tinnitus. So in the UK, a school classroom is about 30 kids. So 1 child in every class has got tinnitus. That means that there are about 8 million people in the UK with tinnitus. And that means that there's about 1 billion people worldwide who have got tinnitus, we think. 15% report a significant impact on their lives. So it's affecting them kind of day to day. It might be stopping them working, stopping them sleeping, stopping them from socializing. And in the UK, about 500,000 require urgent mental health care. So the most common causes of tinnitus is that number 1 is that hearing loss that I mentioned earlier on. And that can be trauma to any part of the hearing system. So anything from the outer ear all the way through to the eardrum, the cochlea, the nerves that lead into the brain, or the brain itself. So that hearing loss, that trauma can basically cause the tinnitus to become worse. That means that if you can correct that hearing loss with hearing aids, then you may well be able to help someone with their tinnitus. And for some people, that result is instantaneous. For others, it takes a bit of time. Loud noise, so exposure to loud noise can cause hearing loss and therefore tinnitus. If you've ever been out to a bar or club and you've woken up the next morning and you've got that ringing in your ears, that's basically what's happened to you. Thankfully, for most people, that's temporary, but for some, that never goes away. And a lot of people that we talk to, that's how they first got and noticed their tinnitus. Stress is really important. So because it's all about this hyper awareness, this vigilance that your brain has, you're noticing things because of this kind of stressful environment that you're in. Tinnitus can cause stress because of this mechanism, but it can also be more noticeable when you are stressed or anxious for other reasons. So a lot of people, if they experience a loss in the family, financial difficulty, trouble at work, these are things that can be stressful. And that's when people can then go, oh, what's that? And that's when they pick up on the tinnitus. That's where they interpret it as a threat. And that's basically where this spiral happens. And anything that blocks the ear as well. So it's really important to know that temporary tinnitus can be caused by, for example, earwax, or it could be caused by an infection or something like that. Anything where there seems to be this kind of hearing loss, even if it is only temporary, the brain, we think, kind of fills the gap. And so that's why sometimes people will say, oh, my ears are a bit blocked. I get this sudden sensation of it being blocked, and then this kind of ringing pitch comes in. And that's basically what's happening there. And that means that if you remove the earwax, remove the blockage, you clear up the infection, then the tinnitus is likely to go away. So how does it work? So I've already covered this kind of. So basically, this is the hearing system, very, very simplified. You will all probably know this far better than I do. But basically, as I've said, damage to any part of the hearing system can cause hearing loss and then tinnitus potentially. So the brain detects or creates other noises to fill this gap, and then a different part of the brain interprets that as a threat, causing a natural stress response, as I've mentioned. The best way, because of this stress response, to manage tinnitus is to retrain your brain to ignore the tinnitus. Now, this can seem really, really tough, but that can start as simply as saying to someone, it's okay. For most people, tinnitus gets better. Let's see what we can do to help you manage it. And coming in with solutions rather than saying, there's nothing to be done. Hearing, there's nothing to be done, or you'll just have to learn to live with it, is one of the most difficult things you can hear if you've been recently diagnosed with tinnitus. Think if you suddenly had a cold, you're struggling to breathe, maybe you have a blocked nose or a sore throat, and suddenly rather than saying, oh, well, I know it will get better in about 2 weeks or something like that, you went to the doctor and they said it's never going to get better. You're always going to feel like that. Even though a cold in and of itself is not that debilitating, suddenly feeling like it's going to take over your life can be really, really troubling. And so we just need to make sure to get that messaging right as early as possible. Retraining the brain is called habituation, and it really works. If anyone on this call is wearing socks, for example, or wearing trousers or a t-shirt, think of the feeling that you have now you think about your socks or your t-shirt. Feel it against your skin, feel it against your body. You weren't aware of that 30 seconds ago before I mentioned it, because your brain had habituated to the sensation of wearing those clothes. You weren't aware of it. But as soon as I mention it, you are. So this is the same with tinnitus. For most people, they are able to tune it out. The brain picks it up, goes, that's not a problem. I know what that is. I've heard it before. But for those people whose brain perceives it as a threat, they can really struggle to do that. But it is possible. And that's absolutely key here. So getting back to what works. This is a chap that we work with, a professor here in the UK. Marielle and Christina described him as the most English-looking man. So I don't know what you think, everyone else on the call. I think he looks quite English. His name is James Jackson, and he has never known silence. He's had tinnitus for as long as he can remember, since he was a child. But he lives well with his tinnitus. He went to see an audiologist over 20 years ago when he had some hearing damage, and the audiologist said, nothing can be done about your tinnitus. And suddenly he went on this spiral from being able to live with it really well because he didn't think it was a problem. He was suddenly told by a medical professional that it was never going to go away. And that sent him on a spiral. So after 10 years, he again learned to habituate. He learned to live with his tinnitus. He now finds it quite useful, actually. It's almost a temperature gauge for his levels of stress. So if it gets louder, he knows to take it back a notch. And he researches and lectures on the psychology of tinnitus and the importance of optimism in care. And he says, this is a direct quote from him, that tinnitus affects people in lots of different ways, but the best thing that you can do for someone is rapid, positive reassurance. So as soon as someone gets tinnitus, you might be the first person that they meet, or they might have gone to their doctor, heard something bad, and then come to you. And the best thing you can do is say, it's okay. We can work on this. Here are some tips to get better. So the faster you can feel listened to, hopeful and active in their own care, help a patient feel like that, the better the outcome will be. And this is good not only because you're helping that person with their tinnitus, but for a lot of people, tinnitus isn't necessarily a very easy thing to deal with. And if you have the same patient coming back time and time again because they aren't getting anywhere with their tinnitus, that can take up your time, it can take up the time of your colleagues, and it basically means that you can see fewer patients. So trying to help that person as soon as possible is really, really key. Helps your business as well. So the best things that we found for treating tinnitus are around retraining the brain and correcting for hearing loss, as I've mentioned. So hearing aids, very, very important. Obviously, we'll get onto that later, but also hearing protection. So even if someone already has some hearing damage, wearing hearing protection when they're in noisy environments like building sites, factories, concerts, sporting events, things like that, still really, really important because it's about protecting what you've got. Mindfulness and meditation, these are really, really key. So when we're thinking about moving someone from that kind of threat response, that stressed mindset, to a peaceful mindset, mindfulness and meditation can really, really help with that. And there are some resources on the Tinnitus UK website that you can use as well, that you can point people towards. Counselling and CBT. So this came up in a few comments beforehand. Now, we think of CBT as a very, very specific program of support that can take weeks or months to complete. It's a very particular treatment and it works. It's the thing that there is the most evidence for working when it comes to tinnitus, that and hearing aids. But any kind of counselling and talking therapies can help someone with their tinnitus as well. And it may well be that they're not just working through the tinnitus, but they're working through some of the other lifestyle stresses that have caused that tinnitus. So they might be working through grief or financial difficulty. Anything like that can be helped with counselling, and having someone listen to you can really help with your tinnitus. Hobbies and socializing. I met someone literally yesterday who said, despite my tinnitus, I keep going to gigs. I should probably stop. Absolutely not. That's the wrong thing to do. The best thing you can do is to carry on with your hobbies. If they're loud, wear correct hearing protection, but don't stop. Tinnitus can already be very isolating. So telling someone to stop doing what they love can make it even worse. And it's the isolation that can often be most damaging to people. That's what causes the mental health conditions and can eventually lead people to perhaps even take their own life in certain circumstances. So encouraging people to still get out and go there in a safe and accessible way is really, really key. The last thing is to learn about your tinnitus. So of course, I will recommend the Tinnitus UK website as the best place to do that. Going to a place you can trust, a source of information that you can trust. But at the same time, you can go to other places in lots and lots of countries have got charities set up to help with tinnitus. The American Tinnitus Association does a lot of work in the US, and they've got some great resources. All of this is English language, but with the wonders of the modern internet, so many of them can be automatically translated as well. And they are useful for people all across the world. And there are lots of different studies showing that maybe certain treatments can be more effective in one place than another. So, for example, acupuncture in China works really well because there's a cultural history of acupuncture. So things that can work to help people in your country already with with their mental health, with their physical health, things like that can also be used to treat tinnitus, because so much of it is about the mindset and having that confidence. And that's it from me. That was a very, very brief overview, kind of rushed through there. But if there is anything else, we'll come to questions and answers later on. You can pop them in the chat. So thank you so much, Marielle. I hope that was useful.
Thanks, Danny, for covering the essential things on tinnitus. We definitely appreciate your personal experiences, because tinnitus, at the very end of the day, it's a very human experience. So the fact that we should remember, first and foremost, to give positive reassurance as the most important thing, I think we should always keep that in mind when dealing with these kinds of clients. So before I discuss the tinnitus management option from Bernafon, this is the fun false, true or false segment. So we'll be talking about common misconceptions about tinnitus with this quick round. First question, true or false? Tinnitus usually improves on its own through a process called habituation. I'll give you 2 seconds to think about that, and the answer is true. So habituation is actually the brain's natural way of adapting to tinnitus, as Danny has mentioned, and not only just tinnitus, any sound, like as he mentioned, the clothes that we wear, we stop feeling them, we just wear them, right? So we get used to it over time. And yes, Danny, you wanted to say something?
I just wanted to mention at this point a study that was done back in the 1980s, and then it was repeated in the 2010s. And they used the same group of people as much as possible. And 70% of people who said that they had tinnitus the first time round reported that they no longer had it 30 years later. So there is real scientific evidence to the fact that actually this happens, and it happens on a large scale as well.
Thank you so much, Danny, for that. Yeah, so over time, as Danny had said, the brain actually stops paying attention to the sound. And for many people, up to 70% over time, right? Over the next few decades, the tinnitus either fades into the background or becomes much less bothersome. So the timeline for this habituation process, you mentioned, Danny, 30 years, but of course this varies from person to person. And the good news that you just need to remember is that it usually happens for a lot of these clients. And one of the most effective ways to support this habituation process is, of course, through sound enrichment, which is basically using gentle background sounds to reduce this contrast between the tinnitus and the silence. So yeah, the key here is really to shift the focus away from the tinnitus towards other things and more meaningful, engaging activities. Let's move on to the second statement. So, tinnitus is a disease which will make you go deaf. The answer to that is false. Tinnitus is not a disease, it's a symptom. And while we don't really have a 100% understanding of everything that could cause tinnitus, we do know that it's not an illness in itself. And instead, it's often a sign of something of an underlying issue, which could be related to hearing, the client's physical health and stress, and of course, their emotional well-being. And it's true that tinnitus often occurs with hearing loss, especially in cases of noise-induced damage, but they don't always go hand in hand, because some people have tinnitus with no hearing loss and others have hearing loss but no tinnitus. So that's why proper evaluation, doing a good case history, and counseling, they're all important. And when a client asks you about tinnitus, it's essential to explain that it's a complex and a very individual experience, and that with the right support, it can be managed effectively. Okay, let's move on to our solution for tinnitus. So Bernafon offers a combined solution for clients suffering from hearing loss and tinnitus, which is a combination of well-fitted amplification together with tinnitus sound support. So as we all know, tinnitus can definitely be challenging, especially when it comes to hearing loss. But the good news is we do have a combined solution that can help manage tinnitus on a daily basis. And one of the ways to help manage tinnitus is sound therapy. Sound therapy is basically a safe, non-invasive strategy that uses sound to reduce the perception of tinnitus and also our emotional response to it. And this could be something really simple. It could be a background music, could be a fan, could be outside in nature, or it can be a relief sound from a device, as you see on the slide, like a hearing aid. And for clients with hearing loss, of course, amplification is the most important thing, right? Because hearing aids not only restore access to all of these missing sounds, but when combined with relief sounds like those offered from Bernafone's tinnitus sound support, they do provide a very powerful dual approach. So this combination of amplification and relief sounds helps shift the brain's focus away from the tinnitus, making it less noticeable and less intrusive. And when hearing aids are worn consistently throughout the day, of course, the benefits are even greater. And tinnitus sound support is available in all Bernafon hearing aids, as long as they have two things: near field magnetic induction, and a push button. So the reason why we need a push button is it allows the client to have easy control so they can turn the relief sound on and off and even adjust the volume as needed. And of course, we need NFMI technology so that any adjustments made with the push buttons are binaurally synchronized. And this ensures this seamless and balanced listening experience in both ears. So experts actually identify three important ways that sound therapy, or in other countries, it's called sound enrichment. Guys, it's just the same thing. But these are the three ways that sound therapy can help manage tinnitus. So the first thing is by masking the tinnitus. When I say masking, I don't mean to mask the tinnitus completely, okay? Not completely, but just enough to reduce the contrast between the tinnitus and the environment so you don't notice it as much. And this really helps with habituation. Sound therapy can also promote relaxation to improve the stress and anxiety that tinnitus clients often feel. And the last way that sound therapy or sound enrichment can help manage tinnitus is by distraction. And this really helps shift the attention away from the tinnitus sound. And from both research and personal experience, we know that amplification alone through hearing aids can usually provide significant relief for a lot of clients. And by making all of these sounds audible again, hearing aids also act as a form of sound therapy to help divert the attention away from the tinnitus. And sometimes, however, clients may actually need a more specific kind of sound therapy beyond amplification. And that's where tinnitus sound support comes in, offering customizable relief sounds designed to meet the individual needs of your client. So let's take a closer look at what it can offer. Tinnitus sound support is designed to provide individualized tinnitus relief by offering this range of sound options that can be adjusted. So it includes 4 broadband relief sounds. That includes white, pink, red, and also shaped to audiogram sound. And it includes 3 ocean-like relief sounds. So all 7 sounds can be customized by you in the software and also by the client with the Bernafon app. So these are the options that we have. And talking about relief sounds in detail, so all of these broadband sounds include the ones that you see on the screen. Shape to audiogram is basically the default in the software. So it's automatically adjusted based on the client's audiogram to ensure balanced audibility across all frequencies. So regardless of the hearing loss configuration. And it also provides a preset volume level, which gives you a really convenient and good starting point to make it maybe louder or softer. And then you have the white noise, and that's basically a broadband noise with equal intensity across all frequencies from low to high. And essentially, it sounds like a static noise from the radio or a shh sound. And then we go to the pink noise, and that's also a broadband signal, but with reduced high frequency energy. So compared to the sound of white noise, pink noise is actually more tolerable for patients with mild to moderate hearing loss. And then finally, for the red noise, it is the most low frequency dominated noise, and it has this softer, deeper, and much more soothing sound quality. It sounds like the waterfall or probably the rainfall. And personally, it's my favorite. So in case I have tinnitus in the future, you know what sound I'm going to use. Okay. So all four broadband relief sounds that I discussed are actually steady state, meaning they remain the same over time. Sometimes, in order to match someone's preferences, you can also apply modulation, which adds this variety to the sound to make it either more soothing or more dynamic. And these are the different modulation settings, ranging from the left off, meaning there's no modulation, it's the same sound. And the more further on the right that we go, it gradually increases the modulation to be more active, and that would be bustling. So all of these options can be easily adjusted by you in the software and also by the client in the Bernafon app. In addition to the four broadband sounds, we also have three soothing ocean-like sounds. So they are also pretty popular because they're quite calming, and it also helps distract from the tinnitus and promote relaxation. Maybe that's for you, Spiros, if you're going to the beach. So what's interesting is that these ocean sounds are actually modulated versions of the white, pink, and red noise, and they're designed to mimic the natural rhythm of the ocean waves. So if that's your preference, then it's also available. Just encourage your client and see which one resonates the most with them. And when you turn on tinnitus sound support in Oasis Next, the relief sounds are actually automatically synchronized to offer the same signal to both ears. And this ensures that the relief sounds are presented in phase and that the client will receive the same balanced sound perception on the right and the left ear. This is particularly important when the sounds are modulated. So for example, if you choose ocean, if the ocean rhythm is not synchronized between the two ears, this will definitely be uncomfortable. So that's why the relief sounds are always synchronized. And another useful feature that you can customize in tinnitus sound support is called automatic level steering. And this can only be activated by you in Oasis Next. So this feature, I think most of you already know, but for those who don't have the courage to use tinnitus sound support, me included when I first started out, so I totally understand. But this feature basically adjusts the volume of the relief sound based on the sound level from the environment. So the clients basically they don't need to manually change it themselves. And this is how it works. So when the environment exceeds 50 dB SPL, then the relief sound is gradually reduced because the ambient noise from the environment already helps to mask the tinnitus. So the reduction follows a 1-to-1 ratio. So for every 1 dB increase in the environmental sound, then the relief sound decreases by 1 dB, up to a maximum of maybe around 10 dB. And this ensures that this relief sound remains effective without interfering with speech or other background sounds. And when the environment becomes quieter again, then the relief sound returns back to its original level. So all of this actually happens automatically, and this helps maintain comfort and effectiveness throughout the day, especially if the listening environment is always changing. So we've covered synchronization, we've covered automatic level steering. Now let's talk about the volume control for the relief sounds. So first, the relief sound volume is independent of the hearing aid's amplification volume. So this means that you can adjust the relief sound without affecting the overall gain of the hearing aid. And then second, volume adjustments can be made monoraily on one hearing aid or binaurally. So you can adjust the volume separately or adjust both hearing aids together. And then finally, clients can adjust the relief sound volume directly using the hearing aid push buttons. So this is the fixed setting. If they want the relief sound volume to be adjusted, it's always the hearing aid. If they want to adjust the hearing aid amplification gain, they can just use the app. So that's the Bernafon app, the RCA remote control, or the Sound Clip A. All right, so now let's continue with our true or false segment. So the next statement is hearing aids will always fix my hearing and tinnitus. So if you've answered a lot of true or false questions in school and you're a good student, you would know that if the statement includes never or always, the answer is usually false. So it's important to address this expectation, which is actually pretty common with clients. Because while well-fitting hearing aids can significantly improve hearing and often even reduce the perception of tinnitus, sometimes providing immediate relief, it does not guarantee that it will fix the hearing loss and the tinnitus. So hearing aids are powerful tools, and you guys knows this, but there is not a one-size-fits-all solution. So they may need adjustments over time, and that often requires patience, a personalized approach, and that's why you have to combine amplification with with counseling. All right? So that would help them with setting realistic expectations. And our second to last statement is there is no tinnitus cure that works for everyone. So the answer to that is true. There's currently no universal cure for tinnitus because while some cases may be resolved through medical or surgical treatment, most people won't actually find a single solution that eliminates tinnitus completely. But that doesn't mean that nothing can be done, and I hope Danny really sent that message across to you guys because there are many effective strategies, including hearing aids, sound therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and lifestyle changes that can really significantly reduce the impact of tinnitus over time. And as hearing care professionals, it's really important to provide this positive, realistic hope, and it's also our responsibility at the same time to stay alert and watch out for any red flags at the same time if we do detect some of these things. So all of these will be in the handout. We don't have to go through it one by one, but here are the red flags that indicate when a client with tinnitus should be referred. So watch out for these things, especially while you are asking the clients questions and taking the case history. Because if you see any of these symptoms, make sure you make the referral as soon as possible. So one of my colleagues from Portugal, he actually uses the tinnitus handicap inventory, or the THI, which is basically a questionnaire to help him decide whether he should refer the client to a doctor or a psychologist. And for those of you who are not aware, this questionnaire assesses how severe the client is affected by the tinnitus. You have 5 scores or grades. Grade 1 suggests that the tinnitus client is not affected by their tinnitus, or maybe slightly. And then grade 5, that's the worst, that suggests that the tinnitus client is catastrophically affected by the tinnitus. So maybe they're, going crazy. And for my Portuguese colleague, most of his clients actually score anywhere between 2 to 3. So that's still mild to moderate severity. If the clients get a score or 4 or 5, then this is the time that he actually starts to send this client in to a doctor immediately. So keep those in mind. And the final statement is the 2 most effective treatments for tinnitus, according to scientific studies, are hearing aids and cognitive behavioral therapy. The answer to that is true. So while there are many treatments out there, neuromonics, linear, TRT, acupuncture, supplements, and vitamins, most have limited or inconsistent evidence supporting their effectiveness. In contrast, hearing aids and CBT are consistently supported by research as 2 of the most effective approaches when it comes to tinnitus. And for those who are not super familiar with CBT, basically it's a therapy that addresses the emotional and psychological impact of tinnitus through this very structured technique like relaxation, cognitive reframing, and guided imagery. So this helps the client change how they respond to their tinnitus. So if you ever meet a tinnitus client and he has this bothersome tinnitus, these 2, hearing aids and CBT, are good starting points. You program the hearing aids and at least provide basic counseling. And if the tinnitus handicap inventory questionnaire shows that they have a really bad score, then maybe consider referring this client to a professional. Some of you might be wondering about TRT, because I certainly did. And there are some evidence that it is effective, but there have been only a small number of good quality papers actually publishing on tinnitus retraining therapy. So there's that. And then the second one is sound therapy. And the reason why it's not included here as one of the most effective treatments is because there is no one type of sound therapy device that is actually better compared to the others. So the results can really vary depending on the sound that you use. So with that, I'll now hand things over to Christina, who will guide you through the practical aspects of fitting tinnitus sound support. Over to you, Christina.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Danny, to give us all this interesting information, why tinnitus is a curse, but actually more interesting or more important that there is always hope for a customer. So really, really great input. And I think even for myself, I love to hear this over and over again. And Marielle, also great that you showed us again, what are all the tools which we actually have in tinnitus sound support, what are the different sounds. And now we talk about it down to the bone. So I will really show you what are the tools which you have available as hearing care professional, how to help your customers to support their tinnitus or also to prevent the tinnitus getting stronger with all the great tools we do have available in Bernafon. So We would like to start with giving you some tips and consideration which are important before you really sit down with your tinnitus client, so that you are aware of a few things which you should consider. As already Danny and Marielle mentioned before, natural sound should always be audible, because it can already help to reduce the tinnitus perception. So therefore, it is really, really important or beneficial to have an open fitting. If the environmental sounds can actually enter the ear canal, then automatically the tinnitus will be perceived less or less strongly. And this is the best remedy to reduce the tinnitus perception. So we recommend, whenever possible, select the venting and the fitting as open as possible. However, we know that sometimes the hearing loss of your client would require a bit more closed fitting. But be aware that if the hearing aid fitting is too close, the client may perceive occlusion, and the more your ear canal is closed, the stronger the tinnitus could be perceived. So it is then on you to find the real balance between an open fitting and the occlusion or the comfort for the hearing aid patient. Another principle or another consideration is that always make binaural fittings for tinnitus. If the client has a bilateral hearing loss, even if the tinnitus is perceived only on one side, a binaural fitting is recommended, because this provides a more balanced auditory perception, and also in addition it can stimulate the entire auditory system. If the hearing loss is only on one side, but the tinnitus is perceived on both sides, then of course also binaural hearing aid should be fitted, but then the amplification on the hearing aid should only be on the side where your client has the hearing loss. Bilateral hearing aids have always shown to be more beneficial than only using one hearing aid in case where the client would like to benefit of a tinnitus program. There are moments when your client perceives the tinnitus very bothersome, and there are other moments when maybe it does not bother him that much. So it's not necessary probably to have the tinnitus sound support activated all the time. Therefore, we do recommend that you create in Oasis Next, of course, a special separate tinnitus program, which the client can activate whenever needed. It may also happen that the client may perceive the tinnitus stronger on one day, very bothersome, and then there are other days where he would not need that much support. So even in these cases, you do have the possibility to maybe make various tinnitus programs which the client can activate whenever needed. Maybe one which is a bit stronger, maybe one a bit softer sound, maybe one with a more active modulation. So it's really great, all the personalization options which you do have with our tinnitus sound support. Now, probably most of you have already seen the tinnitus feature in Oasis Next. Probably also some of you have already worked on it, but maybe for those who are new, I would just like to quickly go through the individual steps, or maybe my explanations can give you some more inputs which you did not consider in the first place. Basically, there are 3 steps how to prepare for tinnitus sound support. First of all, you should fit the hearing instrument to the hearing loss if your client has a hearing loss. Danny mentioned that 75% of all the tinnitus patients do have a hearing loss. So first, we fit the hearing instrument based on the audiogram, and we select the amplification. Then we select in which program we would like to have the tinnitus sound support, and we start introducing the different sound options, broadband sounds or also ocean sounds. And once we have actually decided in discussion with the customer which sound is most comfortable, we will preset again to make sure that we have found the right option, and then we can also add the other options, which I will show you just in a moment. Okay, so now I switch to the Oasis next screenshots. So we see here in hearing aid fitting, we do have tinnitus sound support. And so here we can have tinnitus sound support. So we select the program in which we would like to activate tinnitus sound support. Now, in this case, the first program, which is not visible, would be the amplification program. And here in the second program, we do activate tinnitus sound support. After clicking on tinnitus sound support, you see that the red area and the blue area becomes visible, and this represents the range of the tinnitus sound or the tinnitus noise, which you are presenting right now. So we have activated tinnitus sound support, and now the work with your customer start. This is now where you should present to your customer all the different tinnitus sounds which are available. The first sound, which is the default sound, would be shaped on the audiogram. This is which you see here. The shaped on the audiogram is actually really based on the audiogram, which means the client, he would hear the level very, very softly, slightly above the hearing threshold. But then we also recommend that you try out the other sound options, which is the white sound, the red, pink sound, and the red sound. So introduce all these sounds one after the other separately to your customer and see how he reacts. See how he reacts spontaneously, which sound is most comfortable. Maybe the shape to audiogram is not strong enough. Maybe he would like to have a different, maybe a more flat tinnitus signal, which is perceived a bit better. So it's really now your work to present the sounds again and again until the client has selected which sound is actually most comfortable. Once you have actually selected the sound, you can then even in the fine-tuning band adapt the sound, you adapt the frequency. Maybe if the client says, well, this sounds nice, but it's a bit sharp, then you can still reduce with the fitting bands the high frequency or increase the high frequency. Or if the client says, well, it's a bit dumb in the low frequency, then you have the same possibility to adjust the once selected tinnitus sound with the fitting bands to individualize it. It's not an easy task to do. Working with tinnitus client can sometimes be very difficult, especially if they are only bothered by their own sound. Sometimes it's very, very difficult to find really the perfect sound. And this is also why we recommend try with various tinnitus programs. Try maybe one or two different programs which the client then can activate whenever used. So now you have selected the sound, you have fine-tuned the sound to match his preference, and now the next step would actually be that you can add the modulation. In the modulation control here, if you click on the menu, then you will see now the different modulations will appear. It's from off, and then we do have tranquil, which is a very soft modulation, mild, spirited, and bustling. So the modulation, the rhythm of the tinnitus sound, of the tinnitus noise, just will change and increase depending on the modulation which you would select. And actually studies and experience have actually shown that very, very frequently clients, they do prefer modulated sound, a rhythm which changes over time. It's much more comfortable than if they have a static sound all the time. Marielle talked about volume control, this automatic level steering. This is where you can activate this automatic volume control so that the volume of the tinnitus goes down whenever the ambient sound increases. And you also do have here the possibility to mute the hearing aid microphones. If the client would like to have a tinnitus program without amplification, maybe just a notion program to relax, then you also have the possibility to deactivate the microphones. If the tinnitus relief sound exceeds a certain level, usually it's beyond 80 decibels SPL, then an indicator, a red bar, dominant red bar will appear, warning that the level of the tinnitus will be very loud and that we will need to counsel the client on the wearing time. Whenever this bar appears, you will also see on both areas, on the right and on the left hearing aid, if the level is increased, number of hours, which indicates the maximum wearing time the client should actually use this tinnitus program at the level of the volume control. You may be considering that also depending on the volume control, the range you offer him, this maximum hours a day may increase or it may decrease. So we must always be very, very alert whenever this orange bar increases. Now we are getting into the range where tinnitus actually could be potentially damaging and that the nose exposure should be limited. Now, if we have selected the tinnitus sound, we have selected maybe various programs, we have added the modulation. Now, in the end session screen, we can now activate the tinnitus call to give the client control on the hearing instruments to change also the volume of the tinnitus. And this we do in the end session team, controls, and here we'll see a special control menu, especially for the tinnitus. So in this control scene, now we can activate the tinnitus volume control. If this control is not activated, then the client will not have the possibility to increase or decrease the tinnitus sound. So very, very important that we must activate the volume control. If we would not do this, then in the tinnitus program, the client, if he changes the volume, he would actually increase or decrease the volume of the amplification. And this is not what we want in a tinnitus program. So very, very important, you must activate the tinnitus volume controls. In addition, you can also select the range of the volume control. And there now, what I mentioned before, if you reduce the range of the volume control, maximum we can have minus 7.5 dB or plus 0.75 dB, which is a range of 15 dB. If you reduce the range of the volume control, then potentially the hearing aid user could use the tinnitus program more hours a day than when the volume control range is a bit larger. And here you will see remark, very, very important. That is mentioned now in the program 2, where the tinnitus is activated. The client has the option to use the tinnitus program 10 hours at the level which it has been programmed, but only 2 hours at the maximum level of the volume control. And this is something which is really, really interesting and which we must counsel the client. So whenever this orange bar appears, it means an alert for us. I don't know if you have ever looked in detail at the user instruction for our hearing aids. You would find actually on page around 65, 63 is a special page which refers to the tinnitus sound support menus. So if your client is using tinnitus sound support, then you should hand over the user instruction and fill in on this page 65 or the page it is, each tinnitus program, maximum hours a day at the startup volume and maximum hours a day the client should wear it at the maximum volume. This is very, very important, and here we can avoid that the client would be too much exposed to the tinnitus sound, because also if he would use it too long, it could also be maybe too stressful, and this is something which we want to avoid by all means. Now, a practical tip. It may be that in the tinnitus program, you also would need to increase amplification. Now, very difficult to change amplification if the tinnitus sound is active. So whenever in the tinnitus program you must modify or adapt amplification, you do have the possibility to switch off the tinnitus sound. And this you do here on this icon. Click on the icon to switch off the tinnitus sound. Meanwhile, you can adjust the amplification for your client. When the amplification has been adjusted, then you can just again click on the same icon, and then the tinnitus sound will be audible again. It's really, really a great solution for tinnitus client if they use the tinnitus sound support with the Bernafon app, because with the Bernafon app, they have possibilities to not only change the level of the tinnitus sound on both sides or on one side. You can see here it's the sound level which they can modify, but they also have the possibility to change the sound of the environment. So maybe if they would like to have a bit louder environment to perceive the tinnitus a bit less, they can also increase the volume of the environment. We will also see now that a new icon is available in the Bernafon app version 150, and this new app is the app to activate Comfort Pulse. Comfort Pulse is the great option now where the client has the possibility to individually change the modulation. So if the modulation or if the tinnitus sound support has been activated in the software, then now the client independently, he can change the modulation, he can change the rhythm of the sound which has been selected. He can switch it off, he can use tranquil, he can use mild, he can use spirited, or he can use bustling. And this is certainly also a great, great tool which can help patients to cope with their tinnitus better. So just before we go back to some questions, just a summary again of what we can offer with the tinnitus sound support. So since tinnitus and hearing loss very, very often appears together, so we have a really brilliant solution with our Bernafon hearing aids, which do offer excellent amplification and help to improve the hearing at all, and also in combination with this tinnitus feature. We have a great tool with all these different tinnitones, modulation with the app, and also it's also in your hand to customize tinnitus sound supports for your client. Okay, so I will hand back to Marielle.
Thank you so much, Christina. Very, it's a good, useful walkthrough. And I know that some of you guys might not be so secure in starting to use this app, but hopefully you got to start somewhere. So just try playing around with it. And hopefully with Christina's really structured instructions, that will be the case and you would feel more confident. So we're a bit running short on time, which is why for those who has to leave, totally understand. But because we're so excited about tinnitus, that's why we want to really maximize this session. And for those who cannot finish the whole session, you will find it on YouTube, okay? We'll send a link, so no worries. So let's now transition into the Q&A session. While we wait for some questions to roll in, we actually prepared a lot of great questions in advance. So Danny, are you ready to dive in with me?
Yeah, I am indeed. Go ahead.
Super. And if you're done with the slide, just tell me, and then I'll go on to the next one.
I will do. Thank you.
So the first
Yeah,
question that I have for you, Danny, sorry about that. What are the top 3 tips that you can give for our hearing care professionals?
Yeah, so we've covered an awful lot today, and quite often one of the main questions we get is, that's all well and good, but how do I talk to someone about tinnitus? When they first come in and they say, I have tinnitus, what first? The most important thing you can do is listen. Quite often, people with tinnitus don't feel listened to. They don't feel like anyone understands. They don't feel like anyone gets it. In fact, literally while we've been having this meeting, I've seen a little pop up and emails come back with some lovely feedback for one of the team here, who said that they finally feel like someone's listened to them. And quite often what someone needs to manage their tinnitus is just one person. It could be anyone. It could be a physio, it could be a doctor, it could be a friend, family member, someone from a charity, but it can be you as well. When you're listening, try and pick up on what it is that they're saying. Use their language. So if they say that their tinnitus is really difficult, you can say to them, wow, that must be really difficult for you. That must be very tough. You can ask them a few questions, but mostly give them the space to talk, because that can be very helpful. Be positive, like we've mentioned the whole way through. Talk them through some of the options that are available. It's worth saying, though, again, bear that in mind. So if someone is quite distressed and upset, they might not want to hear, you'll be fine. So again, it's all coming back to those listening skills. And lastly, refer to a specialist. So there was something, I think, Mario, one of the first things you said, if you aren't qualified to do an assessment, what else can you do? And refer to a specialist. Use the slide deck that was in here about when to refer to ENT, when to refer to a mental health specialist. That was some really, really good advice there.
All right, shall we move to the next one?
Yeah, please do.
Is it this one? Okay, yeah, that's the one. Okay, right. I was supposed to ask a question. So if the client reports bothersome tinnitus, what are the 5 questions that the hearing care professional can actually ask the client?
Yeah, so again, when it comes to listening, quite often people don't necessarily know where to start. So you might sit down and go, right, I'm going to listen to my client. Where do we begin? These are just a few simple questions that you can ask. And as soon as you start asking them, they're open questions, lead to conversation. The client will, in most cases, be able to give you a really good answer. And again, that gives you the opportunity to learn a bit more about them. So how long have you had it for? Quite often, people have a specific date. It might be an event. They might not know. Doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong answer. When is your tinnitus at its worst, or when do you notice it most? Quite often, some common answers here. People might say when they're trying to sleep. People might say first thing in the morning. So there's advice available again on the Tinnitus UK website for sleeping with tinnitus. Where you hear it, this is really important. So one ear, two ears, in your head. If it's one ear, just bear that in mind and then refer back to some of those red flags that Marielle was talking about earlier on, because having it only in one ear can be a red flag. What the sound is like, again, really useful question, gives you some good information, lets them speak, but also, again, could lead to some of those red flag answers and the impact it's having on you. And this one is really important. What is your tinnitus like? How does it affect you? And just give that person the opportunity to open up.
Okay, moving on. So if the client asks the hearing care professional, does the tinnitus ever go away? How could they answer this question?
Yeah, so as we've already talked about, it does for most people. And I think that that's one of the first things that you could start with. Managing expectations has come up a couple of times here. And I think what it's worth saying is, some people find immediate relief with a hearing aid or with something else. But for a lot of people, it takes some time. It takes some work. Your client has to be in the right headspace to accept help. They've taken that first step by coming and speaking to you. The best thing you can do is help them on that journey. But it's not necessarily easy. For the vast majority of people, though, it does go away. Now, the study I mentioned earlier on talked about 30 years, but that was like 30 years maximum. Some people, it's a year. I met someone a couple of days ago where it was a 4-year process. Other people, it can be a couple of weeks. Other people, hearing aid in, works straight away, complete relief. So it's really, really flexible. And as it mentions here, don't cause extra emotional stress. Just focus on trying to help take that person through that journey.
We've been talking about sound therapy or sound enrichment using hearing aids. But aside from that, what other sounds can the hearing care professional suggest to a tinnitus client to help facilitate habituation?
Yeah, so lots of people, let them pick a sound that they enjoy. If they want some suggestions, sometimes natural sounds, crackling fire, rushing water, bird noises, wind through trees, things like that can be really nice. And those don't have to be artificially generated sounds. Sometimes people with tinnitus stay inside. They're fearful of any noise, so they don't go out. They're not going out, they're isolated, they're inside, their mental health is going to get worse. So that's where you can help them. It's good medical advice to encourage people to go outside, enjoy nature, enjoy bustling environments. There are other sources of sound, like it mentions here, especially important for sleep. So I presume, Marielle, that most clients wouldn't sleep with their hearing aids in. Is that right?
Yeah, you are correct. There is usually that one or two odd client who wants to keep their hearing aids on at all times, but that's the exception. So yeah, you're right.
Fantastic. Yeah, so when it comes to sleep, it can be useful to have a second device. So that one in the middle there that looks a bit like a clock, that's a sound generator. Perfect, thank you very much. So that's a sound generator. It's designed to sit by the bed, and basically that will create noise. Otherwise, there are speakers you can get that connect to your phone. So if they're playing music or they're playing sounds through their phone, that could be white noise, it could be natural sounds, it could be anything, then that can be, you can get a speaker that sits under your pillow, and it means that you can hear it when you're lying on your pillow, but maybe your partner, maybe your wife or husband can't hear it if they're on the pillow next to you. It might be as simple as opening the window, or turning on a fan, like we mentioned earlier on as well. There's lots and lots of options, or even playing it out of your phone, like I do. I fall asleep with stuff playing out of my phone almost every night.
Okay, moving forward. Are there any exciting research currently happening in the field of tinnitus?
Yeah, so there is loads and loads happening. One of the things that I would really encourage you to talk about, if someone ever says to you, just feels like there's no one out there, no one understands my tinnitus. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of researchers all around the globe who are working on solving tinnitus as a problem. There is a lot of investment going into this, and there is a fantastic network out there. So what I would always say to someone, if they say, oh, no one understands, no one gets it, nothing's happening, just let them know, actually, there is stuff happening out there. There are people who are there trying to solve tinnitus. Now, some of those, there's some crowdsourced data that's come out of France recently that we've seen. They asked 4,000 people what works for you, and the best answer was vigorous exercise, which no one ever likes to hear because no one likes doing vigorous exercise. But it seems to work for people. We don't know why, and this is just crowdsourced data. It's not scientific data or anything like that, but that does seem to work. That might be about your physical health, your mental health as well. Here in the UK, there's a team in Newcastle who are using music to control the brain waves that trigger or cause tinnitus. Now, that sounds very science fiction, but it's essentially a scientifically built understanding of the sound therapy that we've already talked about. So that's very exciting. So that's going to be coming up in the next few years. There's an Irish company called Linear who really focus on neuromodulation. Brain retraining is essentially what that is. And it has shown to be quite effective. They're publishing new papers, I think, every year or something like that. And there's more research going on in the neuromodulation world out in America. Also in America, there are children walking around now who would have been deaf if it weren't for cutting edge emerging genetic therapies. Now, one of the long-term plans for these kind of treatments is that we might be able to use them to treat tinnitus as well. So if tinnitus is caused by hearing loss, if you can help with the hearing loss, you can help with the tinnitus down the line. That is so exciting. In the next 20 years, we may well see the end of like catastrophic degenerative hearing loss. So that's very, very exciting. The other thing I would say is keep an eye on the Tinnitus UK website because we're going to be publishing and sharing more about the research world in the coming months and over the coming years as well. There's going to be lots going on.
Okay. How is stress related to tinnitus? And as everyone probably experiences, most of us have stressful lives. So what could you share about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I mentioned earlier on, your brain, some people's brains have this natural stress response to tinnitus. And that causes this, this kind of hypervigilance, this increased awareness. But at the same time, like I mentioned, stressful environments make your brain pick up on more signals around you. They can cause insomnia, they can cause stress, anxiety, everything like this. That can then cause people to notice their tinnitus. And they suddenly go, oh my God, what's that noise? So stress can cause tinnitus, tinnitus can cause stress. And what you need to try and do is break that cycle. And that's really where the optimism and the positivity in care comes in, is you're trying to disrupt someone's thinking from this constant spiral of stress, worry, tinnitus, stress, worry, tinnitus, stress, worry, tinnitus. And like we've mentioned throughout, while you are fixing their hearing, don't be afraid to point people towards mental health care if they need it. No one is expecting you to be able to provide the kind of dedicated care that patients would get if they went to a mental health service. And it can be really useful for those patients to understand how much support there is out there. So please do that. Keep doing that. That's absolutely best practice as well.
Does Tinnitus UK only work in the UK? So can our hearing care professionals from around the world also have access to the resources from your website?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was going to share my screen and do a bit of a tour. I won't because we're short on time, but all of this is available for free. So we've got an e-learning course called Take on Tinnitus, which is, bottom right just here. You can access that through our website. It's useful not only for professionals, but also for patients as well. I'll mention a bit more on that in a sec. We also have treatment sheets, which are these ones up here, where basically over the years we've looked at and assessed the scientific data behind treatments. Now these are purely the scientific data. This is where we find that CBT and hearing aids are the most scientifically rigorous treatments that we have. And it's a useful starting point for people who might be looking into them. It also fundamentally points out if there's anything dangerous. So, for example, people pointing lasers into their ears or using candles and things like that can be can actually cause more problems than they solve. So useful to look at that. And we also have webinars. So loads of experts from across the world have worked with us, recorded webinars on specific topics, and you can access all of those for free, again, through our website.
And guys, don't worry, we'll send all the links to what Danny has mentioned later on. So you will have access to these specific tools that he has discussed. All right, here we go. So I understand that you have a lot of events for this year. Would you care to share some of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So we help hundreds of professionals every year improve their confidence and their understanding of tinnitus in sessions like this, but also through proper formal training courses. So Take on Tinnitus, like I mentioned, is a great starting point. That's just there. It's recommended by the BAA, British Association of Audiology. They're our professional body here in the UK. They've been going for a really long time and they think it's great. It's also free, great starting point. We've got our Tinnitus conference coming up on the 19th of September. The theme this year is Excellence in Tinnitus Care. Now, you might think a conference in Britain, can't go. It's also available online. So we're going full live hybrid this year, and the 2 main rooms with panels, talks all day will be available. There's also obviously a discounted rate if you'd like to access it online. So you can go to our website, tinnitus.org.uk/conference. There's also going to be online exhibitors and things like that. So loads of information that you can find out. I'd really recommend that. Tinnitus advisor training. So when we're talking about starting to have some of these conversations with patients, what happens when a client is face-to-face with you? How do you discuss it? I was taught and trained how to do that because I went on tinnitus advisor training. This focuses on the psychological and physical care kind of basics, understanding of how tinnitus affects the hearing system and how it works, and there's expert mentors, live Q&As. It's a 2-day online course. It is held live, so it'll be UK timings, but next one is 23rd, 24th of October. It's really, really worth looking out for that. There'll also be more next year, so if that one fills up, we run 3-4 a year, so there's lots of opportunities. And lastly is the European Tinnitus course. Now, this is where people from generally across Europe come to the UK for a 3-day course looking at the latest research, the latest technology, really doing a deep dive. And this is for someone who's done everything else and they really want to become a tinnitus specialist. Maybe they are a tinnitus specialist, but they want to take that next step and just make sure that their learning is really, really up to speed. So fantastic course there. We run with a university here in the UK, and it's absolutely brilliant. And not one for the faint-hearted, maybe, but yeah, really, really fascinating topics that are covered there.
Thank you, Danny, for your thoughtful insights and really, I'm sure it's not only me, but also the rest of the audience who found all of the information that you shared really helpful, incredibly valuable, and yeah, gives us a lot to think about. So,
thank you
guys,
ever so much.
You know what's coming out? Get ready with your phone to scan the QR code, right? So just take a moment to scan the QR code to share your feedback on the webinar. And if you'd like a certificate of participation, of course, you need to type in your complete name and correct email address so you receive your certificate. And yeah, thank you all so much, guys, for spending your time with us today. It's been such a pleasure having you. Keep an eye on your inbox in the following week or so for the follow-up email where we will share the links and the resources that we discussed in today's session. And finally, of course, we want to say a huge thank you to our guest speaker, Danny, for sharing these super helpful information and, of course, your time with us. So let's give him a virtual round of applause. There's a smiley up there, guys. So if you have your laptop with you, you can click on React and put a applause. Oh, wow. Okay, we get some. Wow, heart. There you go.
I like the heart. Thank you for that.
Thank you, guys. All right. So, yeah, that basically ends today's webinar. We're a bit over time by 15 minutes. So we really appreciate your attention and see you next time. Goodbye. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you,
Bye-bye,
everyone.
everybody. Bye, Nani.